Hey, it's Bora from PeachRolls. This is the part 2 of changing the original PeachRolls website into a furniture brand website. I'll cover topics like changing the UI, adding interactive elements, adding hover effects, and so on. So let's not waste any more time and let's dive in. Okay, let's start by changing the navbar first, since that's the first thing in the list. So let's hide every single item here, and let's remove some of the parts from the navbar. So for example, we don't need this get access button, so let's get rid of it. And let's start by changing the names. So for example, since this is going to be a furniture brand, we can call this one collections. And this one, maybe we can make it, and let's make this one shop now. That's it. And let's add maximum width to the navbar. So first, let's remove the width from this one, so it's automatic. And as you can see, it's just one block, and there's logo and this wrapper. So let's add one column inside this. Let's move it inside the navbar. Let's move the logo inside and the block as well. So here we have it. And let's make this one space between center, and that's it. Basically, why we added this is that we need to set maximum width, which will be 144 should be enough. Now, if we didn't add this block, it would have looked like this. To solve this, we go to our parent block and set this to center. That's it. Now let's change the logo. Here I have this logo in SVG format. It's a little bit big, so let's change the height for this one to 25 pixel. That should work. Now it's time to change the fonts here. So I will be using a custom font called Helix, and let's make this one Helix medium, and this one too, but let's keep this one semi-bold. Now we are all set. But this button here is a little bit big, so to fix it, let's go back to our text, and as you can see, we have padding for the text. Let's start by removing the top and the bottom, and let's change the minimum height to 40, and this should work. Now, let's change the audio icon. So here, I have two animations. For the play icon, let's just make it still line, and for the pause icon, let's make it this animation. And we are all set, except we need to change the size, same as the button here, which is 40 pixels. So let's make it 40, and let's make this one 40 as well. And there we go. We are all set here. But audio button is a little bit faded, so let's fix it. Let's add more color to it. Let's change the opacity to 60%. It's more visible now. Now we are all set with the navbar, and let's call this navbar. Now let's change the text first before changing the style. Okay, so this is our text, and I don't want this text to appear, so let's remove this one. Let's remove the button, and let's change the style of this text. So let's change this to the regular font that I uploaded, and let's change the size to 782, and let's change the line height to 64. Perfect. Now this is basically set. And just in case, let's change the transform to uppercase. Now the top text or the main title is set. So let's move on to the bottom one. So this is on the left, but I want it to be on the right. So let's remove the left margin or the left positioning, and let's add 32 pixel right. Let's add columns here. So I want two texts next to each other and one on top. So let's add column, and let's just remove the blocks. Let's move this inside, and let's move this inside as well, and copy paste this one. Perfect. So this is what I wanted. But instead of this text, let's copy paste this button here, so it's easier for us. Perfect. Now, let's change this text. So this is our first text, and let's change this text as well. So let's make it, and there we go. So we are all set with the text here. So actually, let's change the shop now to experience more, and we are all set. Let's change the style here. So first, the width. So the maximum width here is set to 300, which is not good for us or not enough for us. So let's make it 600. And let's change the maximum width from this one and from this one as well. Perfect. Now, the button looks awkward now, so let's change the width, or let's add width to the button itself. And let's actually add minimum width instead of the width. So let's make it 180 pixels. And let's change the minimum height to maximum height so it matches. Actually, let's make it 50 this time. So we are all set here. And let's change the distribute to space between and align to center. Now it is all set. All we have to do now is basically change the style. So let's change the font to regular font, size to 20, and line to 23 should be enough. Same goes for the subtext as well. And let's make this one regular as well. And size on the line should be enough. It looks good. But let's change the color. This should work. Actually, let's remove the paddings for this one. And there we go. Now our subtext is set. Now, since the main title is finished, let's move on to the second one. So let's hide this one and open the solutions. So let's do the same steps. And let's unlock this first. And let's do the same steps. Let's start by changing the text first. So let's go ahead and change this one first. There we go. And let's remove this button as well. And actually, let's go back to our main title and copy paste this column, which I think it will look perfect. And there we go. Now let's remove the text from this one and the button. Actually, let's keep the button. And let's copy paste this block here. Since it's set to fixed, let's change it to relative. And it works now. Let's change the positioning values here. And there we go. So now let's add two blocks and let's move it inside this column. So one will be for the button and the text itself. So let's move the button inside as well. And there we go. Now all we have to do is basically delete this text, and actually let's delete this one as well. So let's remove the maximum width for this one, and let's change the maximum width of the whole block to 600. And there we go. Now let's change this text here. Okay, there we go. Now let's change the button text to explore more. And there we go. We are all set. Let's change the minimum width to maximum width, and let's make it 150. And actually we can change the maximum height and the minimum height to 45 as well. Or let's make it 40. And let's change the style of this text. So actually let's start with the main one first. So let's make it regular. And actually let's change the first to art of furniture. And let's make the size 64. Line 60 should be enough. And let's align it to the left. And we are all set. Let's split this sentence just like this, and it will work perfectly fine. Let's remove the paddings. Let's make this one regular as well. And let's make it 14. Let's change the line to 14 as well. And let's change the letter to 1. And let's change the color, same as the before, to off-white. And there we go. Let's add some gap between the button and the text itself. So let's set the horizontal. 20 should be enough, and that's basically it. So let's go ahead and remove the left part, and there we go. The second part is ready as well. So let's move on to the third one. So for this one, let's go ahead and remove this one, and let's copy paste this 3 times. There we go. And let's change the text for each one. And there we go. Let's go ahead and get rid of this button here, and let's change the style first. So you might ask, why did I split it to 3? So I was thinking about something like this. So yeah, let's change it and we can see it better. So let's go with the regular font for this one, but let's make this one medium. Let's change the size of this to, let's make it 52. Let's change the line to something really small, like 5. That works perfectly fine. And let's change the size of this to 52 as well. But for the line, let's make it 40. And let's remove the gap between these two to 0, and it matches. Perfect. Now, all we have to do is basically change the width of this to maybe 90%. And let's change the align to left. And this is perfect. Actually, let's make this one like 42. Yeah, this is perfect. Now, let's change the style. Now, let's change the style of this one. So let's go ahead and start with the color. I have a color in mind, so let's go with this one. It's a little bit off-white. And let's make the size 16. Let's change the line to 16 and align it to the left. And let's go ahead and remove the width from this one, and we can split the sentence to half from here. And this will work perfectly fine. But now it looks a bit... And this is a little bit too long in terms of the width. So let's change it to 800 pixels. And maybe we can move it a bit down, like 40 dVh. And yeah, this works perfectly fine for us. I want to get rid of this bottom right part, which is useless for us. I will go with this one. So let's move this to center. To do that, let's just remove the left and keep the bottom. Now, let's add some width to this one. So let's make the width to 100%. Maximum width to 800 pixels, just like this one, matching. And let's change it to center. And this will work perfectly fine. Let's get rid of this. And so we have a video here. And let's remove the radius and the border from this one. And let's change the positioning. There we go. Now let's copy paste this one 3 times. But instead of the videos, let's change this one to images. So let's go with the image. I have these 3 renders. So first, let's add this one. Actually, instead of changing it one by one, let's work on 1. So our image looks a bit small. So let's change the width to 100% and height to 200 pixels. And instead of the fill option, let's go with the cover. There we go. Here's an easy way to create the text span. All you have to do is select the text you want to turn into a span and just click on the top options. So if you make it bold, you will create a text span, just like this. Now let's just copy paste this one. And one more time. There we go. let's change the middle image to this, and the right image to, but it took some time to download. There's a cool way to fix the performance issue since these PNG files are heavy. So to do that, let's replace the PNG files with the JPEGs. So now let's change the images to JPEGs, and let's go to replace image. Let's put our JPEGs here. So let's change this one to JPEG, and now we are all set with the images. So let's change the height for this to 250, and for this one, let's make it 180. And this will work for us. So let's change the align option on the parent block to top, and let's change the distribute to space between. There we go. Now all we have to do is basically change the text here. Now we are all set with the third one as well. So let's move on to the last section, which is the CTA or the footer. And for this one, let's get rid of the bottom right, maybe get rid of this text, and maybe we can copy paste this one and remove the button here. So we can change the heights to auto, and there we go. Let's change the text here first. And here we go. Now let's change the style of these text. And we are all set with the text here. Now let's add like a cool effect for the last section, which will be an overlay. So to do that, let's add a block here, and let's move it next to this one. Let's call this overlay. Let's add maximum width of 1440, just like the before. And let's change the position to fixed. From bottom, let's make it 40 dBH. And there we go. Now let's add 2 blocks inside to trigger the overlay. Let's put it inside, and let's remove this one. So now let's change the size here. Let's make it like 30 pixel to 30 pixel. Let's remove the minimum height, and let's make this pixel. And same goes for this one as well. And there we go. Now let's change the display option to flex horizontal, distribute to space evenly, and center. There we go. Now our blocks are here. And let's add like color to these blocks. Let's go with off-white again. Maybe something like this. And let's add color to this one. And let's change the radius to maximum we can. So it's round shape. And there we go. Now we are all set with the triggers. So this is how it looks in the end product. We will scroll down and we will see these 2 blocks here. But there's a slight issue, which is the chairs or the products are misaligned. So it's a bit to the left. So let's go ahead and fix this. To do that, let's go to Animate tab, and let's make sure your auto keyframe is turned off. And let's move this to the right. So let's go ahead and check it out. And this will work for us. Now, let's go ahead and add overlays inside these blocks. So first, let's name it. Let's call this, there we go. Now, all we have to do is add overlays. To do that, let's go to Q with the plus icon, basic, and you will see overlays section here. So let's just add one first, and let's move this inside the black chair. Let's click on it, and here's the overlay editing. Let's change the positioning of this one to right. Let's align it to the top, and maybe change the offset to 5. And we can change the Y offset to 15. And that is perfect. Let's go ahead and remove these paddings first. And Let's change the width and the height to like something like 250 and maybe height to 300. And yeah, this will work for us. Now let's change the radius here. Let's have sharp edges and let's remove the shadow here. So now our overlay is basically set. For the inside, let's go back to the section with the images. Maybe we can copy one and let's hide this one again. Let's go back to our overlay and copy paste this inside the overlay. To do that, let's move it inside the overlay and there we go. Let's get rid of this parent block. So let's move the child's inside the overlay and let's get rid of this block. Now let's change the height to 100% for this one as well. So it will cover the whole overlay. And yep, this will work for us. For the text block, let's change the positioning static to absolute and change the bottom offset or the bottom positioning to 0. Now this is perfect. And let's add like 10 pixel left and right paddings. Let's change the color to black here, or let's keep it gray for the left text, and let's make this one black. Let's remove this icon and let's copy paste this text again. But this time, let's get rid of the span and let's add like pricing here. So let's make it a bit expensive. Now we can change the color and the font weight here. So let's make it like semi-bold and let's make it black. Now this is perfect. Let's get rid of the right padding as well. And there we go. So this will work perfectly fine for us. Let's do the same for the right block as well. So we don't have to create the overlay from scratch again. So all you have to do is basically copy and paste the overlay inside orange share. And let's click it. But when we add the overlay inside the orange shell, it just disappeared. Like the bottom section or the bottom block is now disappeared. To fix it, let's go back to our parent block called overlay and change the positioning to fix. So this is a problem causing this. Now let's go back to our left section and instead of the right positioning, let's make this one left. Now we are all set with the overlays, but now we need to set the interactions or the triggers for these blocks. So first, let's rename this to black overlay, and we can change this one to orange overlay. There we go. Let's go back to our dots and let's add interactions. For this one, instead of clicking, let's make it hover effect. So for that, go to interactions, mouse enter option, and now let's change the action to overlay. For the event, let's make it open. And for the overlay, let's choose the black overlay since this is the left trigger. Now we are all set with the interaction here. And let's change the right one as well. Do the same steps. Instead, let's change the overlay to orange overlay. And we are basically all set here. Let's make the duration visible again and let's turn on other sections. Let's hide this one and let's go ahead and preview. So as you notice, we have these ones here. It's supposed to be in here. This is happening because we haven't set the effects for it or the scroll animations just like the other ones. So for this one, if we set it to the same duration as this text, it will be visible before we reach the chairs. So to prevent that, we want it to be visible at last second. So let's fix it real quick. We have this block here since the start. This is basically a dummy block. And let's go ahead and change the height to 10 pixels for this one. Let's remove the minimum height and there we go. We can call this one overlay trigger and scroll section. Let's go back to our overlay block and let's add effects or the scroll animation. So trigger to section in view. Let's change the section to overlay trigger. And let's change the viewport to bottom since this is like 10 pixel and it's at the bottom. it will not be visible in the other options, like the top or the middle. So let's go with the bottom. Replay yes, and let's get rid of the exit effect since we don't have any sections after this one. And for the enter effect, let's change the scale to 1 and change the opacity, so it will just basically fade in. And that's it for the scroll animation. Let's go ahead and make these visible again, and let's check it out. So the first section looks good. Let's move on to the second one. This one looks good. And this one looks good as well, but I don't like the animation here, which is set to spring. We can change this one. And as you can see, we don't see the overlays yet. We scroll down, and here we have the overlays. All we have to do is basically hover on top of these ones. There are a couple of issues that I've noticed. First one is the text is not that visible, so we need to add like background blur or shade behind the text. And the last one and the second one is basically this overlay hover is not that visible, so let's add like shadow to this one as well. First, let's go with the easy one, and let's go ahead and choose our indicators or like the triggers. Let's add shadow, and let's change the blur to like 10, and let's do the same for this one. Let's go ahead and check it out. And yeah, it is much more visible now. And let's go back to our first problem, which is text is not that visible. Let's go with the second one first, which is the solutions. All we have to do is basically add a block here, and let's go with the top, since the top is not that visible. And this blur comes with the template itself, but it's set to pink, and this is the image, so you cannot change the color. So let's delete this one. Let's move it below the columns, and let's change the height to 300, and let's add fill. Now all we have to do is change the blur, and we can add like 115, but it is below the text, so all we have to do is change the positioning to relative, and we can move the top margin or the top positioning to minus 300. It is set to 300 because the height is set to 300, so it will basically equal as the height. So let's click enter, and as you can see, it is better. Now let's change the z-index for this block. To do that, let's scroll down, go to style, and you will see the z-index option, and just click minus, and there we go. We are all set with the block here. For the third section, we don't have to make it from scratch again, so let's copy paste this one into here. So for this one, let's delete this blur again, and let's delete this block, and let's paste it below the text, and there we go. But for this one, 300 pixel height is a little bit too much, so let's make it like 250, and let's change the positioning to minus 250, and there we go. Works perfectly fine. Now let's make it visible again, and let's preview. So everything looks good. Let's check out the audio button first. Works perfectly fine. Let's scroll down. Looks good. This looks good as well. And this works perfectly fine. Only adjustment we can make is that maybe we can change the opacity of the background blur down to like 50%. So to do that, let's go. We don't have to hide everything. So let's change the opacity to 0.5. And for the third section, let's do the same. Let's make it 0.5, and let's preview again. And here we go. Text is much more visible, but the background is not that dark, so we can see the background as well. And this works perfectly fine for us. So now let's change the appear animation of the images here. So let's hide everything again, except the third block. And let's click on the parent block here, and let's go to effects. So all we have to do is basically go to enter and change the transition to maybe linear. And we can change the duration to like 600. And let's do the same for exit as well. Let's make it linear and let's make it 600. Now let's go ahead and preview. So let's scroll down. Looks much better. And there we go. So this is the final result. We have one more page, which is the loading page. And if you go to preview, you will see the circle with the percentage. So this won't basically fit for the whole design of this website. So we can go ahead and change this one. To do that, let's go to pages, which is this icon. And let's go to loading page. And here we have the settings for the loading page. First, let's get rid of this gradient here. And let's delete the loading bar here. And maybe we can add our logo here. So to do that, let's go to basic and image. And let's put our logo here. Let's move it inside the wrapper. And here we go. Let's change the height to 200. And we are basically all set here. Let's go ahead and preview again. So this is our loading page. And there we go. It works perfectly fine. Now all we have to do is basically publish this website. And we are all set. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more tutorials coming up. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.